Today, I'll share a story so raw, even silence carried a warning. Beneath a bruised sky in the lawless West, where every shadow had teeth, one broken town dared to make its final stand. It started with a whisper, a faded medallion swinging from the neck of a man with nothing left to lose. That whisper became a war cry. And by dawn, the West would remember one name, Colt Marston. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. In a lonely frontier town, a pack of well-known outlaws made the foolish mistake of sizing up a quiet drifter in a weather-beaten poncho, as if he were nothing more than another dusty traveler. Their miscalculation became deadly clear when the stranger's hand flashed like lightning, so fast that 7 men hit the dirt before their fingers even brushed their holsters. Before we ride deeper into this tale, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story grabs you, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's chapter carries something you won't want to miss. The sun-blasted streets of San Lorenzo grew unnaturally still as Colt Marston guided his dark stallion into town, his poncho stirring in the warm desert breeze. The brim of his hat shadowed most of his face, revealing only the hardened eyes of a man who had stared death in the teeth more than once. Late-day light stretched long across the empty street, casting the broken mining town in a bleak, haunting glow. San Lorenzo, once alive with miners and merchants, had slipped into silence ever since Rafe Cordero and his gang began terrorizing the region. Marshal Boone Kestrel's badge had dulled, just like the man himself, after failing to protect his town from raid after raid. His courage drowned with the whiskey he kept nearby, while San Lorenzo faded under the weight of fear. Marston stepped down outside Lila Vaughn's saloon, the sharp jingle of his spurs echoing across the boards. His stallion, large, black, and frighteningly disciplined, stood without being tied, waiting on its master like a soldier awaiting command. Through the dusty window, Lila watched him with a mix of caution and uneasy curiosity. Strangers wandered through often, usually dragging trouble behind them. But this one felt different. Something in the way he carried himself made the hairs along her arms rise. Inside, the saloon felt half abandoned, only a few locals nursing warm drinks in the corners. San Lorenzo's heartbeat had grown faint, just like the people still clinging to it. At his usual table, Old Man Whitlock, the telegraph operator, raised a shaky glass. His eyes flicked nervously from his drink to the newcomer, the habits of a man who had delivered too much bad news for too many years. In another corner, the Calder brothers, Jax and Rowan, watched as well, weighing the stranger with the sharp instincts of hired guns. They were known across the territory, men whose loyalties belonged to the highest bidder. "Whiskey?" Marston murmured, the faintest hint of an unplaceable accent in his tone. Lila poured the drink while studying his reflection in the mirror behind the counter. His movements were controlled, precise, like a wolf saving its strength. The poncho hid most of his shape, but the disciplined posture betrayed a man with a soldier's past. A dark, worn gun belt clung low to his hip, its leather burnished smooth from countless draws. Nearby, Doc Harlan shuffled cards absently, his weary gaze tracking Marston. Years patching bullet wounds had taught him to spot a dangerous man before trouble arrived. And trouble usually wasn't far behind. Mara Quinn, Lila's sharp-eyed assistant, moved through the saloon with her usual confidence, now replaced by careful steps. Something about the stranger unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. Then the door slammed open. Vex Dalton, known across 3 counties as the Snake, strutted in with 3 of Cordero's men at his back. Dalton's grin faded the second he laid eyes on Marston. His fingers twitched toward his gun before he stopped himself, choosing instead to twist his smile into something cruel. "Nice poncho, stranger," Dalton sneered as he sauntered closer. "Might want to watch where you wear something like that. Folks'll start thinking you're hiding something." His men fanned out, hands hovering near their weapons. Around them, the last few patrons slipped quietly toward the back exit. Everyone knew the tone Dalton used before blood hit the floorboards. Marston didn't turn, didn't blink, didn't even acknowledge him, just lifted the whiskey to his lips. Behind the bar, Lila's hand drifted toward the shotgun kept hidden beneath the counter, while Mara nudged the remaining customers out to safety. "I'm talking to you, friend," Dalton pressed, now standing right behind Marston. The floor creaked as he shifted his weight, ready to strike. The Calder brothers watched closely, hands resting casually atop their gun belts, ready to seize whatever came next. Then, in a motion so smooth the eye could barely follow, Marston spun. His poncho swept like a shadow, and suddenly the barrel of his revolver pressed flat against Dalton's gut. "I hear you," Marston said quietly. "But I'm not your friend." Silence smothered the room. Even the clock behind the bar sounded louder. Dalton stepped back, face burning with rage and embarrassment. "You just signed your death warrant, stranger," he hissed. "Rafe Cordero don't take kindly to folks threatening his boys." The gang backed out the door, never turning their backs on Marston. Dalton's glare lingered until the very last second. Lila hurried to Marston's side, her heart still pounding. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Cordero's gang will return, and next time it won't just be 4 of them." Marston finally faced her, and Lila caught sight of a silver medallion hanging from his neck, some kind of badge, though not one she recognized. "That's what I'm counting on," he replied, his voice low, steady, and frighteningly certain. The last rays of sunlight bled through the saloon windows, casting everything in deep red and bruised purple. A fitting curtain for the storm that was heading straight for San Lorenzo. Night dropped over San Lorenzo like a thick wool blanket, smothering the town in a heavy hush. The cantina had emptied hours earlier, ever since the tension with Vex Dalton. Now, only Colt Marston remained, seated in silence with a bottle of whiskey beside him. Glass untouched. He wasn't there to drink, he was watching. Through the dirty reflection of the front window, he kept his eyes on the empty street outside. Lila Vaughn wiped down the bar with steady hands, stealing glances at the stranger whose presence had upended her saloon. The lamplight flickered across the silver medallion hanging from his neck, and recognition hit her like a chill. It was a badge. Mexican Federal Police, but worn, aged. A relic from another life. That realization didn't ease her nerves. In fact, it made them worse. "The Calder brothers," Marston spoke suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. "They're not just hired muscle." Lila paused, setting down her rag. "Best sharpshooters in 3 territories," she muttered. "Sell their aim to whoever pays the most. They've stayed neutral so far. Rafe tried to bring him in, but they don't like being owned." Outside, Old Man Whitlock shuffled past the saloon window, hunched and clutching a stack of telegrams. His steps seemed even more anxious than usual tonight. Marston watched him disappear across the street into Marshal Boone Kestrel's office. "You're Marshal," Marston said, finally turning his gaze to Lila. He wasn't always buried in a bottle, was he? Her jaw tightened. Boone Kestrel was the finest lawman this territory had, until Rafe's gang rode in on their first raid, made him watch as they killed his wife and little girl. She gripped the edge of the bar. He never came back from that. Just then, the front door creaked open, and Doc Harlan strode in, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Lila," he said, his voice low and grim, "you might want to shut this place down for the night." "What happened?" "Telegram from Piedras Negras. Rafe's crew hit the bank there yesterday. 3 dead. One of them a child." Marston's hand clenched around the glass, knuckles whitening, though he didn't lift it. "How many men does he have now?" he asked flatly. 20, maybe more," Doc replied, accepting the glass Lila slid to him. "Word is he's gathering more. Feels like he's planning something big." From the back room, Mara Quinn emerged, her face pale. "Lila," she said, her voice unsteady. "The Calder brothers just rode out, east, headed straight into Cordero's territory." The words hit like a gust of cold wind. Everyone in the room understood what it meant. "They've been bought," Marston said. "Rafe's consolidating." The door slammed again. Marshal Kestrel stumbled in, looking more alert than he had in weeks. A crumpled telegram was clenched in his hand. The badge on his chest caught the lamplight. Tarnished, but still there. He stepped toward Marston. "Whitlock just got this from Mexico City," Boone said, handing over the telegram. "Says a former federale named Colt Marston has been tracking Cordero's gang for 6 months. Leaves a trail of dead bastards behind him from one border to the next." The marshal's bloodshot eyes locked on the medallion around Marston's neck. "That you?" he asked quietly. Before Marston could reply, the sound of gunfire cracked through the silence outside. 2 of Cordero's men had cornered Old Man Whitlock near the telegraph office, accused him of sending out messages. The old man's panicked pleas were cut short by a shot. Marston moved before anyone else could breathe. His poncho flared like wings as he stepped through the door. 2 shots, clean, fast, final. The bandits hit the ground before they could even turn. Whitlock was still breathing, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Doc Harland rushed past with his bag, while Marston stood in the street, gun still smoking. "They're getting bold," he said coldly. That wasn't about Whitlock. That was a message. Rafe wants this town to know it belongs to him. Lila stepped up behind him, her voice trembling with anger. "You're not just passing through, are you? You're hunting him. This is personal." Marston didn't look at her. He holstered his revolver and stared into the distance. "Rafe Cordero wasn't always running a gang," he said. "He was my commanding officer, a corrupt federale. Sold out his own unit to the cartels. I was the only one left." His fingers brushed the medallion. "This belonged to my brother, Kane. Rafe made me watch while he shot him." Something shifted in Boone Kestrel then. The fog in his eyes lifted. His voice steadied. "Then I guess we've both lost more than we care to admit." He stepped closer. "So the real question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marston looked out into the night once more. "War," he said. "He thinks he's gathering men for a big score. What he's really gathering is bodies." The lantern behind him flickered, casting his shadow tall and grim on the saloon wall, like the spirit of vengeance come to collect on a long overdue debt. By morning, word of the shooting had rippled through San Lorenzo like a rattler in the brush. Folks hurried through their routines, eyes constantly darting toward the boarded-up telegraph office, now guarded by Mara Quinn in Whitlock's absence. Out on the boardwalk, Colt Marston sat hunched over his revolver, cleaning it with the methodical precision of a man born to violence. His eyes never left the street. Doc Harland had worked through the night to keep Whitlock alive, and finally came out at dawn with hopeful news. The old man would make it. Then Marshal Boone Kestrel came walking down the street, sober, steady, telegrams in hand. 3 more messages came in, he said. Cordero's crew hit 2 more towns yesterday. They're moving with purpose, Marshal Boone Kestrel muttered, eyes scanning a rough-drawn map laid across his desk. Not just random raids anymore. They're all funneling toward one place. His finger tapped a marked point. The old silver mine out in Devil's Canyon, 20 miles east. That's where he's staging. Lila Vaughn stepped out of the saloon carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her face tight. "Still no word from the Calder boys," she said, handing 1 cup to Marston. "But a traveler rolled through, said he saw them riding with a large crew, red bandanas and all, near Rattlesnake Creek." Marston, seated on the edge of the boardwalk, didn't look up. He was reassembling his revolver with clean, surgical focus. "How many?" he asked. 30, at least," Lila answered. "All marked with Cordero's colors." Boone cursed under his breath. That's more firepower than he's ever pulled together. He ain't just out for blood this time. Marston gave a slow, grim nod as he slid the revolver back into its holster. "The bank here in San Lorenzo ain't his target," he said. "There's a federal payroll shipment passing through next week. $500,000 in gold. Enough to buy himself a damn army." Their eyes met, and Boone felt a knot form in his gut. "How do you know that?" he asked. "How could you possibly?" Then the realization hit him. "Piedras Negra," he whispered. "They weren't there for the cash. They were after the manifest." "Exactly," Marston confirmed as he rose to his feet. "Rafe always planned ahead. This ain't just a heist. It's the first move in taking the entire territory." "With that kind of coin," Boone muttered, "he could buy every dirty judge and lawman from here to Mexico City." Lila's hands trembled slightly as she set the coffee pot down on the railing. "And we're sitting right on the middle of that route. If this goes down, we're not just in danger, we're ground zero." Their conversation was cut short by the distant thunder of hooves. A lone rider stumbled into view down the street, his coat torn, soaked in dust and blood. It was Jax Calder. He barely managed to dismount before crumbling to the ground, clutching his side. Marston and Boone ran to him just as Doc Harland rushed from his office, kneeling beside the injured man. A deep wound bled from his ribs. "Rafe," Jax gasped. "He doubled our rate to join up. But when we got there, he started executing anyone he thought looked sideways. Said we were all disposable." His breath hitched. "Rowan. He questioned one of Rafe's orders. They shot him, in the back." Marston knelt beside him, jaw tight. "How many men's he got now?" 43, Jax croaked. "But that ain't the worst of it. He's got Gatling guns, 2 of them. He gritted his teeth. And he knows you're here, Marston. Said to tell you, he remembers. Said this time, you'll watch everyone die, just like last time." Doc Harland's face turned grave. "He's bleeding inside. Too deep. I can't save him." Jax reached up and grabbed a fistful of Marston's poncho, his grip shaking. "Make him pay," he rasped. "For Rowan. For all of us." His hand fell limp. His eyes glazed over. The street fell into silence. Boone and Harland lifted the lifeless body and carried it down the way toward the undertaker. A small crowd had gathered, hushed and pale. Lila Vaughn stepped to Marston's side. He stood frozen, staring at the blood now staining the hem of his poncho. "You're not just going to sit here and wait for him, are you?" she asked, though her voice already knew the answer. Marston turned slowly. His voice was cold iron. "No," he said. "Rafe wants a war. I'm going to give it to him." He looked to Boone. "But first, we prep this town." The marshal nodded. his spine straightening like a man remembering who he once was. "How many folks here can handle a gun?" Marston asked. "Maybe 20, Boone replied. "Might hold their own in a scrap, but 43 men and Gatlings, that's suicide." "Numbers don't win fights," Marston said as he checked his ammo belt. "Fear does, and so does surprise, and Cordero's about to learn the taste of both." Off in the distance, thunder rolled, low and ominous, matching the dark clouds now gathering above the hills. The wind kicked up grit in the streets, and the townsfolk began shuttering windows and locking doors. Inside homes, valuables were being hidden away. Every eye watched the sky. They knew. The storm was coming. San Lorenzo wouldn't just be another stop on a map. It was about to become a battlefield. If you've stuck with us through this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Every story we share takes time to bring to life, and your support means everything. Now, back to it. As dawn broke over the rooftops of San Lorenzo, Colt Marston stood at the center of Main Street, eyes sweeping over the small group gathered before him. 20 townsfolk, rifles clutched in anxious hands. Marshal Boone Kestrel had pulled every soul he could find, willing to take a stand. They were scared, sure. But there was steel beneath the fear. And Marston knew fear could be used if it was pointed the right way. The morning air hung heavy with tension and the metallic tang of oiled steel as San Lorenzo's ragtag defenders gave their weapons one final check. Rafe Cordero expected to find a town full of cowards and empty threats. "He's walking into a fortress," Colt Marston declared, his voice cutting through the hush like a drawn blade. Every street, every rooftop, every darkened window had become a trap. He pointed toward the buildings lining the main road. "We've got one edge. This is our ground. We picked the fightin' spot." From the old saloon's doorway stepped Lila Vaughn, her late husband's Winchester resting firm in her grip. Her eyes were set with steely resolve. Close behind her came more women, among them Mara Quinn, who'd proven herself a quick learner and dead-eye during their crash course at dawn. Doc Harland had turned the church basement into a makeshift infirmary. Marshal Boone Kestrel announced it to the room, his voice steadier than it had been in years. 3 ammo caches, all stocked. If we lose one, we ain't lost the war. He added, sobriety and renewed purpose bringing the marshal's old authority back to life. Colt laid a crumpled map across a barrel, holding it down with stones. Rafe's boys will come from 3 sides, he said, dragging his finger across the paths. Their Gatling guns are slow haulers. They'll want elevation here and here. He tapped the ridges north and west of town. What they don't know, he continued, is we already kissed those hills good night. Last night, under the cloak of darkness, Colt and a handful of brave hands had wired both spots with dynamite pilfered from the old mine shaft. They set up shop there. We'll bury 'em in half a mountain. Old man Whitlock, arm still in a sling, limped up with news. Telegram from my kin over Devil's Canyon. Rafe's boys are drinking hard tonight, celebrating early. They hit at dawn, Colt said with a grim nod. Good. Drunks fight sloppy. He began breaking down the town's defenses. Teams of 2 or 3, sectors marked, escape lanes drawn. Every corner had its plan. Lila stepped beside him as the townsfolk took their posts. You're holding something back, she murmured. This ain't just about payroll, is it? Colt didn't answer right away. He watched them string up wire, board windows, brace doors. He wants revenge, he finally said. After that bank teller clipped him last time out, he's burning to make an example. It ain't about gold, it's about pride. And how do you know that? Lila pressed. Because I was trained same as him. Same tactics, same ghosts. His hand brushed the old medallion at his chest. He ain't some wild raider, he's a tactician. Everything he does, it's layered. Boone Kestrel joined them, spinning the cylinder on his revolver. Then why bring up the gold at all? He asked. Because folks need something to hold on to. Colt answered. Hope will push 'em further than fear ever could. But tomorrow ain't about no money. It's about whether this town breathes come sundown. Right then, a rider stormed in from the east. Scouts, the man yelled. About a dozen, coming fast along the ridge. Colt stayed calm while others scattered. Just testing our nerves, he said. Then to Boone, show 'em what San Lorenzo does to men like Rafe. The marshal grinned like his old self, picked 4 of their sharpest eyes, and they slipped into place. Minutes later, a quick burst of gunfire flared on the town's edge. 3 riders dropped, the rest vanished into the mist. That'll give 'em something to chew on, Boone muttered, pleased. They'll be back, Colt said, eyes locked on the distant horizon. Next time, they'll come loaded and mad. Get everyone inside before dark. We'll stain these streets with their blood come dawn. By sundown, San Lorenzo no longer looked like a town. It looked like a war camp. Barricades choked intersections, rifles poked from windows, lanterns dimmed behind shutters. Inside Lila's saloon, now turned command post, Colt Marston went over the last of his plans. Come sunrise, the outcome would be final, freedom or fire. But Rafe Cordero wouldn't take a single plank of this town without bleeding for it. Dawn crept up with a dead man's silence. Colt stood still on the saloon balcony, his poncho swaying in the breeze. Below, San Lorenzo sat like a ghost town. But behind every window, behind every door, hearts pounded and rifles waited. Lila Vaughn crouched upstairs, Winchester leveled. Movement on the ridge, she whispered. Through her scope, riders emerged one by one through the fog. 15 shadows coming for war. Colt Marston stood motionless, only his eyes flicking back and forth, tracking the gang of riders creeping into town. They're probing again, he thought. Main force'll hit from the north, right where those Gatlings got a clear shot. His fingers brushed the grip of his revolver. Wait for my signal. The first wave entered slow, horses sidestepping, riders uneasy. Yesterday's ambush had rattled them good. They moved like alley cats, expecting a boot to the head. The Calder brothers' names still carried weight, enough to shake even outlaws. Rafe Cordero's crew didn't know just how many gunslingers the town had backing it now. Up in the church tower, Marshal Boone Kestrel scanned the northern ridge through field glasses. They're setting the Gatlings, he reported through a runner. Just like you said. Colt lifted a tiny mirror, catching the sun. 1, 2 flashes. That was the cue. Seconds later, twin eruptions thundered through the hills. Boulders and dust cascaded down the slopes, swallowing the heavy guns and the poor souls manning them. Horses screamed, tumbling with their riders. The outlaws inside town spun around in a panic, realizing too late they'd been baited into a trap. Then the hellfire started. Shots rang from rooftops, windows, alleyways. Defenders laid waste to the confused attackers. Lila Vaughn's rifle cracked with unflinching precision. Every shot hit home, Colt muttered as he scanned the frenzy. Rafe ain't here. This is just the feeler. He's out there, watching, learning where we stand. Almost like he summoned it, a fresh horde charged in from the west, 24 strong, led by none other than Vex Dalton, the one they called the Snake. This crew didn't hesitate. They lobbed dynamite ahead, blowing holes through barricades. The street lit up with fire and smoke as another savage fight broke out. Colt moved like a shadow, cutting through chaos with deadly rhythm. His Colt barked 6 times in 6 heartbeats, 6 men down, each one never knowing what hit him. But Vex spotted him and turned the fire toward the saloon. "Fall back, second line." Colt's voice was iron as splinters flew from the balcony he'd just abandoned. The defenders pulled back in practiced rhythm, luring the enemy deeper into the kill zone. More blasts tore through the road, traps Colt had set hours earlier. Raiders screamed as horses fell under them. Mara Quinn proved her grit, taking down 3 flankers with ice in her veins. Even Old Man Whitlock, bleeding from a busted arm, ran messages between posts, keeping folks locked in tight formation. Down in the church basement, Doc Harland worked non-stop, blood up to his sleeves as the wounded poured in. The battle burned on for hours, but it was no free-for-all. It was Colt's map they were fighting on. Every alley a snare, every storefront a fortress. By high noon, over 20 raiders lay dead in the dirt. Only 3 defenders were wounded. Vex called the retreat. His gang limped off, leaving silence in their wake, eerier than the bullets. Colt used the lull to check ammo, shift fighters. "They'll be back come sundown," he said inside the saloon to Boone and Lila. "Rafe likes dusk, that low light's his edge." He scanned their faces, something gnawing at him, but this hit felt too straight up, too clean. Lila's brow furrowed. "I counted 23 dead, but that still leaves—" "She's right," Colt cut in. "That leaves 20 unaccounted for." He exhaled slow. "Rafe's holding his best men. This was just to drain us, make us waste powder." He turned to the marshal. "Boone, check every damn building. Rafe ain't just a thug, he's a war mind. He'll send crawlers in while we're distracted." The sun started bleeding into the haze, turning the sky a bloodied orange. Everyone knew they hadn't seen the worst yet. The real war for San Lorenzo was about to begin, and Colt's instincts? Dead on. During a supply check, they found 3 of Rafe's men crawling out from the town's abandoned mine shafts. The infiltrators had slit 2 throats before anyone caught wind. "They're in the walls," Boone muttered, jaw tight. "Rats with blades." The search of every building began. Colt slipped through the dark, poncho rustling with each stride, ammo belts crisscrossed tight on his chest. He'd tracked every bullet they'd fired that day. And they were down nearly half. If Rafe really did keep his worst demons in the dark, then tonight would be painted in blood. Lila came to him with a whisper of trouble. Mara saw movement in the old granary. 5 men, maybe more. Looks like they're digging in. She hesitated, her voice dropping. "There's more. The bodies we recovered, some weren't his usual men." Colt's jaw locked. They were trained, real trained. He nodded grimly. "Mercenaries." His voice dropped low. "Rafe's been recruiting." The payroll raid was just the start. He's not after coin anymore. He's building an army. Colt Marston checked his revolver without thinking, his fingers moving on instinct. That's why he needs San Lorenzo. It ain't just about robbing wagons. It's about turning this place into a fortress, a launching point for something far bigger. Then came the blast. An explosion tore through the north end of town. The old stables lit up in flames, casting the streets in a harsh orange glow. In the confusion, shots rang out from all sides. Traitors who had slipped in quietly now revealed themselves, opening fire in a coordinated ambush. "It's a distraction," Colt yelled, but the warning came too late. From the south, the main assault struck like a hammer. At the lead was Rafe Cordero himself. The infamous bandit rode a black stallion, his silver-trimmed sombrero flashing in the firelight. At his command, the remaining raiders stormed the town. Chaos erupted. Defenders were fighting room to room, barely holding the line against the infiltrators while trying to brace for the southern charge. Doc Harlan's station was already overwhelmed, his hands soaked with blood as he tried to save the wounded. Old Man Whitlock died defending the church, took down 3 bandits before one found his heart. Colt tore through the fight like a ghost of vengeance, his guns spitting steel with terrifying precision. Every shot landed, but for every outlaw dropped, another took their place. The defenders' positions, once carefully chosen, became choke points, death traps, as they were caught between the ambush and the main push. Lila Vaughn held steady, rallying a crew of townswomen to evacuate the wounded while laying down a steady stream of return fire. Mara Quinn, with her rifle sharp and eyes sharper, kept the enemy from taking the heart of town, but ammo was running thin. Marshal Boone Kestrel fought like a man possessed. The ghost of his past cowardice burned away in the fire of battle. He personally led the charge that reclaimed the church, but it cost dearly. Half his men lay dead or screaming, and the bandits still held the high ground. Then came the voice Colt had hoped he wouldn't hear. Rafe Cordero called out across the battlefield. "I remember you, Marston. I remember how you begged for your brother's life." He sat tall on his mount, calm as ever, as if the bullet slicing through the air meant nothing. "Surrender now," he called, "and I'll make it quick this time." Colt answered with a single shot, one bullet that sent Rafe's horse collapsing, the bandits scrambling for cover. But the damage was done. The defenders faltered, the fight turning personal now in their eyes. By midnight, San Lorenzo burned. The last defenders had been pushed to the saloon and church. Lila's Winchester had gone silent, her ammo finally gone. Boone was still standing, though bleeding, his left arm limp at his side. Colt checked his ammunition, 6 in the revolver, 4 in the rifle, and 3 loose rounds. Not enough. Not even close. Yet he smiled, cold and calm. He still had one move left, one final trick Rafe would never see coming. And it was built on something the bandit could never understand: sacrifice. As the clock passed midnight, Colt gathered the remaining fighters in the saloon's basement. The flicker of lanterns cast long shadows over tired, bloodied faces. "We've lost too many," Boone muttered, clutching a bandage tight to his wound. "And we're nearly dry on bullets." Around them, the groans of the injured filled the room. Doc Harlan worked quietly, setting splints and whispering comfort where he could. "That's exactly what Cordero expects," Colt said, laying out a worn map across the table. "He thinks we're boxed in, broken." His finger traced along an old line under the town. "But there's something he doesn't know. The old silver mine, it runs beneath the whole damn place." Lila's eyes widened. "The supports, original timber, 30 years old, dry as sagebrush." Colt nodded grimly. "We get everyone out through the church tunnel. Then we blow the north end to hell. The chain reaction will bury half his men alive." "You'll need someone to set the charges," Boone said, his voice steady despite the pain. "And someone to hold them off long enough for the others to make it out." He looked directly at Colt. "I owe this town that much." "No," Colt said without hesitation. "He came here for me. This ends where it started. 2 ex-federales, one final debt of blood." Just then, Mara burst into the room. "They're moving in, at least 30 men, coming from every side." Colt turned to the group, laying out the last desperate plan. Doc Harlan would lead the wounded through the tunnels to a safe house miles outside town. Lila and Mara would rally the few defenders left to buy time. And Colt Marston, he would stay behind to light the fuse. "What about the rest of the ammo?" Lila asked, voice tight. "Leave it," Colt Marston ordered. "Load what you can. Spread it around. Let 'em think we're still dug in." As the townsfolk began slipping away under cover of smoke, Colt made his way to the mouth of the old mine. Just 3 sticks of dynamite left. It'd have to do. He knelt at the timber struts, his hands steady with memory. He hadn't used demolition skills like this since his days with the Federals. Above ground, Rafe Cordero's voice rang out through the fiery haze. "This how you wanted it to end, Marston? Like your brother? On your knees begging?" Colt didn't answer. He crouched behind the cracked wall of the saloon, watching the outlaws take their final positions. Rafe sat proud on a fresh mount, surrounded by his best men. The evacuation was nearly done. Marshal Boone Kestrel, despite the bleeding wound in his side, had refused to leave. He'd climbed the church tower and now waited, rifle aimed square at the street. Lila came to Colt one last time. "There's got to be another way," she whispered. "There ain't," he said softly. "Some debts. Only blood settles." He pressed his brother's medallion into her palm. "If I don't make it, make damn sure Mexico City hears what happened here." Hooves thundered in the distance. The final assault was starting. Colt moved like smoke through the burning ruins, planting the last munitions where they'd trigger the worst collapse. From the tower, Boone's rifle barked, felling 2 of Rafe's men. Gunfire tore back at him, forcing the marshal behind cover. It was the opening Colt needed. He reached his final post just as Rafe's scream cut through the smoke. "Come out and face me, coward, or I'll burn every last board of this town." Colt struck a match, the flame flickering in the dusty dark. The fuses were laid. The weight of justice waited on burning cords. Above, the outlaws moved freely, unaware the ground beneath them was death waiting to fall. "Some men," Colt muttered, "deserve to be buried in the hell they made." He touched the flame to the fuse and counted slowly. Then, he stepped out into the fire-lit street. Rafe's men raised rifles instantly, but their leader lifted a hand. "Finally grow a spine, old friend." Rafe sneered, dismounting with a cruel grin. "Or did you just run out of places to hide your guilt?" Colt didn't move. His poncho billowed in the blistering wind. "You always talk too much, Miguel." The use of his real name made Rafe's smile twitch. Up in the tower, Boone waited for a clean shot, but the bastards had taken cover in every shadow. "You remember, don't you?" Rafe paced slowly, hand inches from his holster. "That day you learned the truth, the look on your face when I shot your brother." He laughed darkly. He cried just like all the rest. Colt's face stayed stone, but his eyes burned. "My brother died a hero. You'll die a coward." 30 seconds. That fuse was close. "I built something," Rafe growled. "An empire, while you chased ghosts." He motioned to the blaze around them. "After tonight, every inch from here to Mexico City will know my name." "San Lorenzo," Colt said, steady as stone, "will be your grave." The first tremor shivered through the dirt. Rafe blinked. His men shifted, uneasy. Dust fell from rooftops. "Now, Marshal," Colt roared. Boone's rifle cracked. The bullet struck Rafe's right arm mid-draw, spinning him sideways. Colt's revolver cleared leather in a blur. He dropped 2 of Rafe's gunmen before they could breathe. The street exploded into chaos. Buildings shuddered and cracked. "Kill him!" Rafe screamed, clutching his bleeding arm as he drew left-handed. But his gang was crumbling, just like the earth beneath their boots. The mines collapsed in a roaring chain, swallowing saloons, storefronts, everything. Boone kept firing, picking off panicked outlaws as they fled unstable ground, until a lucky shot from Rafe nailed him in the shoulder, knocking him back behind the church bell. Colt and Rafe met in the heart of the collapse, both guns blazing. A shot tore through Colt's side, but he didn't flinch. His return fire slammed into Rafe's chest, dropping the bandit leader to one knee. The last support snapped. The ground tore open. Rafe's remaining men screamed as they vanished into the abyss, buried beneath fire, stone, and the sins they'd carried. Rafe staggered, blood blooming across his ornate coat. "You've killed us both," he rasped. Colt stepped forward, unshaken. "I only lit the match. Some reckon justice demands blood," and Colt Marston believed it. His pistol locked on Rafe Cordero's chest as he whispered the words like a vow. The bandit leader gave a broken laugh, blood bubbling at his lips. "Then collect what you came for, brother killer." Both men fired. The canyon roared with twin gunshots. Rafe's bullet grazed Colt's neck, but Colt's shot flew true, striking Rafe square between the eyes. The infamous bandit lord crumpled backward into the darkness as the last tunnel walls gave way. The earth swallowed the northern half of San Lorenzo, dragging Rafe Cordero and his army down into dust and legend. Colt stumbled forward through the thick, settling smoke, making his way to the shattered church tower, where Marshal Boone Kestrel leaned against the rubble, struggling to stand. "Some made it out, headed east," the marshal coughed. 4, maybe 5 riders." "Let 'em ride," Colt muttered, clutching at the blood leaking from his side. "They'll carry the story." And they did. San Lorenzo would be remembered not for its fall, but for burying El Coyote's twisted dream of empire beneath the very land he tried to claim. As dawn broke, golden light washed over the broken town. Half its buildings lay in ruins, but the people stood tall, and in time they'd raise the town stronger than ever. From the steps of the ruined church, Colt looked out across the vast crater where the enemy's stronghold had been. Doc Harland had patched him up the best he could, working fast after returning with the evacuees. Lila Vaughn approached, holding Colt Marston's medallion in her hands. "The folks are coming back," she said gently. "Those still standing are already rebuilding." She paused. 3 riders came in from Mexico City. Federal officers. Colt nodded, wincing. "They want proof Rafe's dead. His fall left a power gap. Every gang from here to the capital's gonna want his scraps." Near the edge of the crater, the 3 officers dismounted. Their faces were filled with awe and disbelief. The lead rider, Captain Holt Brannigan, approached slowly. "We thought you were dead," he said. "Part of me did," Colt replied, touching his bandaged ribs. "The part that used to believe in mercy." Marshal Kestrel stepped forward, arm secured in a proper sling. "The ones who made it out? They're already spreading tales," he said, saying the earth itself rose up to swallow El Coyote whole. "Let 'em talk," Lila cut in. "Fear does more than a battalion ever could." Captain Brannigan unrolled a set of documents. "Government wants a permanent garrison here. This town's too important to leave wide open." He looked to Kestrel. "We need a man with your backbone to command it." Boone squared his shoulders. Some of that old fire returned to his eyes. "I'll think it over," he said. "But first, we rebuild." By midday, survivors were clearing wreckage, dragging timbers, salvaging what they could. Mara Quinn led the rebuilding efforts, organizing crews to patch the least damaged buildings. Meanwhile, Doc Harland converted part of the church into a working infirmary. Colt watched silently, unreadable. Lila noticed his stare and came up beside him again. "You're leaving, ain't you?" There'll be others, he said softly. Men like Rafe, who think their ambition matters more than folks' lives. His hand drifted to the empty space where Kane's medallion once hung. The fight's not over. It never is, Boone said, joining them. But thanks to you, we've got something worth fighting for again. Captain Brannigan's men documented everything. The wreckage, the fallen, the stories. 60 bandits dead in one night. El Coyote's empire turned to ash. The payroll, Lila suddenly remembered. Wasn't it supposed to come through next week? There was no shipment, Colt confessed. I made it up, fed him lies to draw him out. He'd grown too smart, too careful. I needed him to believe he had something worth risking it all for. Boone let out a short laugh, despite the pain. You played him good. I played us all, Colt muttered. The only way to beat a man like that is let him think he's already won. As the sun climbed high, wagons rolled in from neighboring towns. Supplies, fresh hands, hope. You could stay, Lila said, her voice low. Help us rebuild. The feds, they'd reinstate you. Colt shook his head, checking his ammo pouch, adjusting his poncho. My road's out yonder, but this town's got what it needs now, folks willing to fight for it. He mounted up, the shadows of the poncho hiding the fresh wounds beneath. Sometimes, the best way to honor the dead is to keep fighting for the living. 1 month later, San Lorenzo began to rise again. The giant crater that had swallowed half the town was slowly being filled in, while fresh timber and sweat raised new buildings from the scorched earth. Colt Marston's name had turned to legend in the territory. Whispered in saloons, murmured around dying campfires. Marshal Boone Kestrel, fully recovered from his injuries, now oversaw the construction of the new federal garrison. Its skeletal frame stood atop the very ground where Rafe Cordero's men had made their last bloody stand, a fitting monument to law prevailing over lawlessness. 24 federal troopers now patrolled the streets, their presence a firm warning to any outlaw foolish enough to test the vacuum left behind. Lila Vaughn had expanded her saloon, adding upstairs rooms for the influx of travelers drawn to San Lorenzo by its newfound reputation. Her place had become a hub for traders, drifters, and lawmen alike. Its walls now lined with newspaper clippings recounting the infamous Night of the Devil's Grave. 3 more gang leaders turned themselves in just yesterday, Boone told Captain Holt Brannigan during their meeting. They claim the ghost of Rafe Cordero still haunts the mines, dragging the corrupt down to hell. Mara Quinn, now the town's official chronicler, carefully recorded every tale that came through. With every retelling, the myth grows, she noted. Some folks say Marston wasn't even human, just a vengeful spirit sent to punish the wicked. But the truth was both simpler and more haunting. Reports were coming in from across the territory, tales of a lone rider in a weathered poncho, appearing wherever rot took root. 2 crooked judges had resigned after unexplained encounters. A cartel's arms shipment was found in ruins, its guards babbling about a shadow that cut through their camp under moonlight. Doc Harland, who had expanded his little clinic to match the town's needs, collected these stories in a leather notebook. He's finishing what he started, the old physician told Lila one morning. Rafe wasn't just one man. He was a symptom of a deeper disease. Colt understood that. The federal inquiry into Cordero's network revealed the scope of his ambition. Ledgers linking corrupt officials across 3 states, each one now scrambling to explain their sudden fortunes. The rot was being carved out, confession by terrified confession. Boone had turned down the offer to lead the garrison. San Lorenzo needs someone who remembers, he said plainly. someone who knows what our freedom cost. Behind her bar, Lila kept Colt Marston's medallion, polished and framed. A quiet tribute to the man who never got to see the town rise again. Travelers sometimes asked about the mysterious rider who'd brought down the infamous Cordero. She'd give them a soft smile and answer, "Sometimes, justice rides in with a poncho and vengeance in its heart." The rebuilding of the town wasn't just physical. It changed the spirit of San Lorenzo. Folks held their heads higher, spoke their minds louder, unafraid of lurking shadows. The fear that had once wrapped itself around the town like a noose was gone. They'd faced the devil and buried him beneath the weight of his own greed. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, a lone rider appeared on the ridge. The troopers stiffened, but Boone raised a hand, signaling them to stand down. The rider moved through town without a word, his poncho dark against the dying light. He didn't pause, didn't speak, but those who glimpsed him swore his eyes held the same fire that had turned San Lorenzo's darkest night into a legend. "He'll be back," Lila whispered, watching him fade into the dusk. When the darkness forgets its place. San Lorenzo had become more than a town. It stood now as a symbol, a reminder that wicked men could be brought low, not by force alone, but by will, sacrifice, and a reckoning that never sleeps. And somewhere out there, across the dry stretches of the frontier, a man in a poncho kept riding. A ghost made flesh, a promise kept, ensuring that Cain's sacrifice would echo through time. The tale of the devil's grave would pass through generations. But the truth, that lived in the eyes of those who had stood beside him. They knew justice wasn't born in courtrooms or silver badges. Sometimes it was carved in silence, carried by one man's refusal to bow to evil. 6 months had passed since Cordero fell. San Lorenzo, reborn from ash, now gleamed beneath the morning sun. The new federal garrison stood proud, its walls a monument to survival and resistance. Colt Marston's legend had reached beyond the border. In every corner of Mexico, his name had become synonymous with justice in a land still strangled by greed. Marshal Kestrel stood at the window of his office, watching the bustle of early morning. Today's stage brought word from Mexico City. 3 more corrupt men had stepped down, all tied to Rafe's fallen empire. Their confessions spoke of a shadowy figure in a poncho. Lila entered, holding a letter. "This came for you, Boone. Sealed by the feds," she said, placing the envelope on his desk. He opened it slowly, eyes narrowing as he read. "They found a journal in Cordero's things." He glanced up. "It names every deal, every dirty hand. But there's more." He tapped the page. "It mentions Cain. Says Colt's brother uncovered the whole plot years ago. He'd been building a case, gathering proof, long before the killing ever began. His hanging hadn't just been revenge. It was a desperate move to bury a truth too dangerous to live. That's when Marshal Boone Kestrel finally pieced it together. Colt Marston had spread the false word about a hidden payroll not for gold, but to bait the men who'd come chasing it. This wasn't about money. It was about finishing his brother Cain's unfinished war. San Lorenzo had changed. What was once a scarred town now thrived beneath the warmth of safety. Every week brought fresh wagons of settlers, drawn by stories of a place that buried its wicked past deep beneath its boots. The giant crater where nightmares once howled had been filled, paved over with stone. Now, children ran across it laughing, where once only ghosts walked. Mara Quinn's account of the siege became required study in every federal law academy. The Battle of San Lorenzo, taught as a masterstroke of frontier justice and resistance. but only those who'd stood in the dust and smoke knew what truly happened. That justice was born from a man who'd chased vengeance so far, it purified a whole territory. Doc Harland ran his clinic in town still, though his reputation had spread far beyond the valley. Folks came from days away, just to be treated by the doctor who'd helped save the town. And every so often, one of them would speak in hushed tones about a rider in a dark poncho, a man who appeared when law failed, a man who vanished when peace was restored. One night, as Lila Vaughn locked up her saloon, she noticed a small package resting on the bar. No name, no footsteps. Inside lay a medallion, Colt Marston's, now polished, the chain mended. Tucked beside it, a note. Keep it safe. Some legacies were never meant to fade. Far south, Rafe Cordero's journal had lit a fire of reckoning. What started as whispers turned into the largest anti-corruption hunt in Mexico's history. Every arrest, every exposed official, every deal broken in the dark, could all be traced back to that single night in San Lorenzo, when a man in a poncho chose to bury evil once and for all. Boone Kestrel now kept a worn map in his office. Pinned along it were sightings of Colt Marston, each one tied to a crooked sheriff exposed, a smuggling ring destroyed, a town freed from fear. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern. One by one, he was dismantling the last rotten limbs of the empire that had once shielded monsters like Rafe Cordero. Justice now rode the back roads in a poncho, carrying the weight of a brother's sacrifice and a town's redemption. San Lorenzo had become more than just a place. It was a reminder that darkness, no matter how deep, couldn't stand long against the grit of decent folks who stood their ground. The crater that swallowed monsters had given birth to something stronger, hope. As the sky burned gold behind the hills, Lila placed the medallion back behind the bar, in its rightful place of honor. In its shine, she caught a flicker, a silhouette distant and steady, a lone rider heading west, the fabric of his poncho catching the dying light like a shadow that wouldn't vanish. She smiled to herself. Somewhere out there, justice still rode, not for fame, not for glory, but to make damn sure the blood spilled in San Lorenzo was never forgotten. They still tell stories about the man in the poncho, around fires, in dusty saloons, in quiet homes where people pray justice holds firm. But the real legacy? It lived in every changed heart that stood witness that night. When one man's hunger for revenge became a mission for righteousness, when the town's blackest hour became its dawn. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us. Subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.